He nui kia koutou tēnei te mihi o te wā. Welcome to Social Services Select Committee. We are in Zoom today. We were intending to travel to Auckland, but there was a request not to travel based on the needs of the community of Auckland due to the floods. So we have shifted everything and moved across into Zoom to support the community up there. Today we are hearing from, we have a full day of submissions, hearing from the submitters into the bill for the Accessibility for New Zealanders bill. So with that, welcome to you all. We have 3 wonderful interpreters helping us today to support us. I will ask us all to describe what we're wearing randomly throughout the day, and we'll request whether our submitters would like that as well. So hopefully we will be supporting our community in that way. So with that, if we could hear Kirk Auckland and Joe Bond. Good morning, Joe. I see you are here on screen. If you could turn your camera on if you'd like. Oh, there you are. And that's it. Thank you so much. Now we have you for 15 minutes, Joe. I really appreciate your coming before us again. And good to see you the other day as well at the petition. So looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're in your hands. If you'd like to leave time for questions, please do so. I'll let you know at 10 minutes. Is that helpful?
It is.
Okay, thank you, Joe. We're in your hands. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to my submission today. So, one of the things that Kirk Auckland was concerned about is accessible housing. I know at the moment that Aotearoa has a 15% target for accessible housing for our public housing. And I know that the Labour Party wants to increase that to 25%. We are of the view that we want the number to be much higher. This partly comes from the needs of people in the group who have got physical disabilities, and it partly comes from my experience of going to a disabled housing hui before the pandemic, that disabled people don't just want accessibility in their own homes, they would like the ability to visit their friends. And if there are more accessible houses, then they can go and visit their friends much more easily. Otherwise, they're kind of a bit more restricted. Another thing that we had, because I ran an accessibility hui that came out of it, was that we have an aging population and nobody knows when they're going to acquire a disability. So if you're in Aotearoa housing, they can make adaptations to your disability, but the next person who comes along might be fine and then get another disability and need something else. And then that's expensive again to change the property again for their disability. But if we have universal design, it means that it doesn't matter whether someone's disabled or not, or which disability they have. The place will be equipped for a multitude of possibilities that can come up in the future and be much more adaptable, the person living there, because even their needs can change. And it was also pointed out to me that even the non-disabled can use some kind of accessibility modifications. Say if someone breaks their leg and for a few weeks, or I don't know how long it takes to heal, they need things in their property to help them. If they're already in place, then great. That saves a lot of trouble. And it is also a long-term investment. So if you modify places for universal design or build them for universal design in the first place, then you don't really need to do anything more unless technology rapidly upgrades. It's already there, so nothing more needs to be done except maintenance. So I think that it's a good financial investment for Aotearoa as well to have more universal design and accessible buildings going forward. That's the first thing. The second thing is public transport. I know there's been problems with staff shortages and industrial action in Wellington and staff shortages in Dunedin and Auckland. I've noticed, because I can't drive because of my medical condition, that it's actually more difficult to get places. For example, an Ed Sheeran concert was on, so they cancelled an entire bus route so they could have enough drivers to ferry people from the Ed Sheeran concert. That's fine because I was able to adapt to that. But I had another incident where there were no northbound trains and I had to go back to Auckland Airport and stay in the international terminal all night because I had no public transport to get back. So I think that public transport around the country needs work. Dunedin used to have great public transport. Now the frequency of the bus routes is far reduced and the bus routes have made everyone disabled and abled alike frustrated with the routes that they take are no longer convenient for people who live there. I think it's great that the government has halved the price of public transport. That really does help disabled people because many of them have less money than the general population. But I think more needs to be done around frequency and around convenience of routes. I went to a public transport meeting where two able-bodied men who are quite tall said that they deliberately designed bus routes so that people got 10,000 steps of walking in a day. That's okay for them, but it's not good for people who are mobility impaired and might need to get on closer to their homes. And it's not good for women walking after dark because there are all kinds of creeps out there. And it's not good for time management. I think that that kind of thing needs to be scrapped and they should go for convenience. It would also encourage more people to take up public transport in general if they felt that they weren't wasting so much time compared to riding in a car. And I know that there are people who care about the environment who might want better public transport for everybody. So that's something that Kirk Auckland is concerned about. Another thing is education, making sure that education is accessible for everybody from kindergarten right through to tertiary education. There are people who are best integrated, need good teacher aid, and shouldn't be left to do dunce work while everyone else is doing sophisticated work. But to make sure that the teachers are aspirational for them. We signed up to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and in it is disabled leadership. And disabled people need to feel like they too can have a place in the world. Employment, leadership opportunities, and that they get to live to the highest potential that they can possibly live to. We don't want them to have a life that is slightly restricted because they didn't have the opportunity to extend themselves as far as they could. I also think that, speaking from personal experience, university campuses need to be set up to accommodate people studying with all disabilities. I did my undergrad at Otago, and when the fire alarms went off, the lights would dim and brighten for the deaf people. But yet, I've been to other places where that doesn't happen. It's only a sound alarm. And I don't understand why not all campuses around the country are required to have the brightening and dimming of lights. Make sure that deaf people know that there's an emergency. Because yes, you can get people running around looking for people, but you might not find everybody. So I think it's very important that people who cannot hear know that there is an emergency. I would also like to see, in addition to that, people who are mobility impaired having guaranteed access to leave a building, not just stairs. What's going to happen if the elevators don't work and there's only stairs? I highly doubt that very many buildings are equipped with something that can put on staircases to get disabled people out who are in wheelchairs. Are they to die in these disasters? I would certainly hope not. I heard through the floods that were in the Hawke's Bay in Northland that radio coverage and TV coverage of the emergency wasn't as good as it could be. That would impact disabled people as well. When you've got your telecommunications out and your internet out, you need reliable information that doesn't rely on that infrastructure. So I'd like to see a review into the AM frequencies, into what Radio New Zealand provided to people and what people actually got, just to verify how good or bad that is. Another thing is that I submitted on the Aotearoa New Zealand public media bill, and I read the select committee's report coming back.
10 minutes,
and I
Joe.
agreed with a lot of it. Oh, sorry, it's just one point I want to make. They scrapped the part about catering for disabled people, which is nearly a quarter of the society. But to do that, that means that they won't have universal standards of accessibility on their website and other places. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. You could have continued. It was really just a prompt to let you know where we were at in our times.
Yep.
Thank you for your submission. I must say, it's as I hear more and more, there are these so many things that would make life easier for people. And the example of the flashing lights when there's a fire alarm, perfect example of something relatively simple that could easily be done on public property, government owned property. Do we have any questions from the select committee? No, it appears not.
There's one from Maureen.
Oh, there's Maureen, right? She put her hand up. Sorry, Maureen, missed that.
No, you're all good, all good. Thank you very much once again, Joe. I'm particularly interested in your comments around the education sector, because as I trip around various schools, even the most rural or remote schools, there is a huge amount of investment being made when a disabled child enrolls in the school. Where do you see the gaps now? So where are the improvements that could be made?
Okay, there's two things. One thing is that some private facilities that cater to disabled are in danger of being closed or have been closed. There are some students that do better outside of mainstream education. And I know that some people think the ideal is to integrate disabled people with people who are non-disabled. But some people actually do better in a cater-made facility for their disabilities. And I think that more of those should be supported and kept open and better funded. In terms of people who are in mainstream education, I think that we need more aspirational goals for them. We need more funding for them. And we need more understanding of what their needs are, be it sensory needs or physical needs. There are a lot of teachers who don't understand the disability of the students that they have. But if they don't understand the disability of the students that they have, it's not their fault. They haven't been educated. So there needs to be a lot more education of students and teachers towards disability in general so that they can be more compassionate towards the disabled students that they have.
Thank you. So can I, just to be clear, you're suggesting that for private run facilities, there should be more funding to enable them to integrate? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. It doesn't appear we've got other questions for you. Look, really appreciate you appearing before us. Really good submission. You've made your points well. We appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Ka
You
kite.
too.
Thanks.
See you later.
Bye-bye. We now have Ada Lee by Zoom.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I don't believe that Ada Lee is online. Let me just see if we have any nearby submitters.
Thank you. So perhaps while we're waiting, while that's being checked, we could do a descriptor of what we're wearing today and what we look like. That might be helpful just as a summary if people are listening in today. So I'll start, and probably all of our screens have different orders on them. So what I'll do is I'll start and then I'll direct Inez, and then I'll direct the next person so that we know who's going next. So I'm Angie Warren Clark. I'm a Labor MP based in the Bay of Plenty. I have decided today to wear all black. So I am wearing a black top with flappy wing arms, and I have glasses and blonde hair. Emily.
Kia ora. I have short grey hair. I'm Pākehā. I have big heavy glasses, and I'm wearing a green shirt.
Liz.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Liz Craig, Labour List MP based in Invercargill. I've got blonde curly hair and I've got an apricot jacket and wearing a white shirt.
Jen.
Kia ora, I'm Jen Logie. I've got short grey blonde hair, big black glasses. Today I'm wearing black and have a really, may not be able to see it, but I'll show it off, a really beautiful necklace.
Sorry, my screen didn't want to change then. Yes, it is a very beautiful necklace. It looks like some kind of a stone. It's some kind of a sort of precious
quartz. Yeah.
Quartz. Yeah, it's lovely. All right. Anahila.
Kia ora. I am wearing black and I have a pounamu. I'm wearing a pounamu and I have glasses. I am Tongan.
Thanks, Anahila. Tony.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tony Severin, MP based in Christchurch. I have long red hair, curly, and I'm wearing a blue-green showing up on the shirt.
And a very cool background with with the old view of the centre of Christchurch. Teresa.
Talofa, my name is Teresa Ngubi. I am the Labour MP for the Otaki electorate. I am Samoan Scottish. I have brown hair, brown skin, and I'm wearing red glasses today.
And gorgeous matching red lipstick. And Maureen.
Good morning. My name is Maureen Pugh. I'm Nationals List MP and I'm based in West Coast Tasman in the South Island. Today I'm wearing a grey and white spotted top with a pink necklace, and I have short brown hair and I'm wearing glasses.
Thank you. And with those descriptors, we now have the next submitter here. So we're moving on to Amy Clay. We'll see if we can get the previous submitter back in due course. So, Amy, I see that you are here on screen with us. If you'd like to turn on your camera and take yourself off mute, there you go. You've just, there you are, Amy. Right. No, that is absolutely fine. We're having a few little issues here. Look, thank you for your submission. It's my favourite, I think, thing that I have seen so far, and it says the government needs to be brave and fierce like disabled people. That way my daughter can grow up to live in a functioning community where she doesn't watch her friends play on inaccessible playgrounds that councils describe as accessible. I loved that, so thank you. Welcome, Amy. Really appreciate you being here. We have 10 minutes with you. If you'd like to leave some time for questions, please do. And would you like me to let you know at 5 minutes? Or
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Great, thanks. Welcome. We're in your hands.
Okay. Thank you for having me. My name is Amy. I am the parent of India Rose, who's a 10-year-old girl who lives with cerebral palsy, who is fierce and determined, so keeps me on my toes. And this is Daniel, her father, next to me, who's here to tautoko me. So India has really strong friendships, but access barriers get in the way of her life and our whānau's life every day. There's lots I could talk to about, but today I just wanted to focus on council facilities because When I read the Accessibility Act, I had so much hope that things would change for us. And I am not feeling that after reading the Act. I think it is going to be very slow. And there are quite a few things that could happen right now very quickly to make change to disabled people's lives. And one thing we experience is council facilities. For example, the Auckland Council has quite really impressive inclusion policies, but the reality of how they put that into practice is dismal. There's not a single swimming pool in Auckland with a hoist and a changing table. My daughter can't swim in Auckland anymore now that she's too heavy to lift. That could change now. She could go to the pools, our family could go to the pools if the Accessibility Act put in a mechanism for those instant things that we all know already exist. Am I allowed to share my screen? Yeah. So
Yes, our clerks will help you with that.
okay.
We're all spread around the country, so they're in control.
Can you see the screen now?
Not
Oh,
yet.
okay. Oh, yep, here we go. So if you see that toilet at the top, can you see that now? Sorry.
Yep, absolutely can.
So that's our local swimming pool in Auckland. That's their disability toilet, and they've put, to make it accessible, they've put a Bunnings picnic table in there over the top of the toilet, and that is their solution, which I think is undignified, unsafe. We can't actually get Indy's wheelchair and commode in there, and also she does actually use the toilet as well. If you look at the bottom, you can see how Fielding have actually put into practice good inclusion policies and have the most beautiful swimming pool toilet I've seen. But in Auckland, a city of, I don't even know, is it 1.5 million now? We get a Bunnings picnic table. We need legislation to stop this happening, and we already know that this exists. So that's an example of how the policies just aren't working at the moment. There's too much up to individual people. And I have tried to engage with council on this. I've tried to engage with our local board. They are not interested. I just get stonewalled on it. Which leads me to Mission Bay Playground. That was recently, so that's in our local area, that was recently completely rebuilt. There is not a single piece of accessible equipment in that playground from a wheelchair. I queried this with the council. I was told that because it was a redevelopment, not a rebuild, they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to make it purely accessible. They said I need to go to our local accessible playground, which is down our street, which coincidentally we can't actually get to. It has no disability parking, and it has no disability playground equipment either. So my daughter watches her friends and cousins play, and it's awful. Can you see the other screen? Sorry, I don't know what you're seeing. Can you see the pictures of the playground?
No, we can just see the toilets.
Yeah, so I'm just going to change it to, yeah. So this is what it's like. All those children on that playground equipment, those are Indy's friends and cousins. So we have the beauty of living on Orake on our Papakainga. So Indy's watching them play. And that is our local accessible playground, Destination 1. And at the bottom, that shows you what her experience could be like with one piece of playground equipment. So yeah, and I attempt at grassroots to advocate for my daughter, but it just goes nowhere. The boards, they don't listen. It's not a priority for them. And another example, so I get told to go to the Disability Advisory Board for the Auckland Council, but the Disability Advisory Board's own recommendations don't get listened to either. For example, they recommended that a proper disabled changing facility, like the one I showed you in Fielding, would go into the new Albany Stadium pool. And what really happened was the council built that pool with no disabled changing facilities. So this is why children like India and adults and all disabled people need accessibility legislation that makes some changes right now.
You're about at just past 5 minutes there, Amy.
And my husband just wanted me to mention one other thing. When I did engage with the chair of our local board, his response to me was, I don't think the community would support spending money on this. That was in regards to the playground and potentially having a changing places toilet at Mission Bay. That's why we can't leave it to local politicians to do this. If they don't have an investment in disability, then they don't do it. Okay, I'm finished. Thank you.
Really, really good submission, Amy. Thank you. The pictures make it so much more obvious and real. Now, first and foremost, I have to say how culturally inappropriate a table or changing someone is, even regardless of the indignity of it. So that is just awful.
Can I just add something there? One other thing there is the staff are quite proud of it. They think they've come up with a really ingenious solution, which just sort of shows the big gap in knowledge. And I was really concerned when we were at that pool to see a mother carrying her adult son in there by herself. It's so dangerous.
Yeah,
but she's got no choice.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the need for hoists and supporting people. Look, the other, I think what you've also given us is a really good example of even where people do design and put in place accessible things, they also fail to do a wider look. I know certainly in our own local community, we've had a new changing places toilet created. And one of the things, we had 2 wonderful big spaces for mobility vehicles. But the lip to get across and up with wasn't fixed. So one of the things that has happened in our community in Tauranga is that basically the roading company have agreed that the phone call can be made to have these things rectified immediately. Still needs a phone call, still needs a system overview, still needs a review, but that's the kind of thing that shouldn't need to have to happen. I see Maureen has her hand up, so we'll go to a question. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy, for highlighting those issues that you're having. The job we have in front of us is with the current bill. And so I just want to be clear, in the examples that you've given, are you saying to us that there needs to be some kind of standards inserted into the bill so that there are clear guidelines and rules?
Yes, that's right. And regulations. So that when the council, because I'm just specifically focusing on council things, when they upgrade or build new things, that they have to put these things in place. I know it's not practical to suddenly roll out and retrospectively change everything, but as those upgrades happen, if we don't have the rules and regulations in there, then we will keep getting toilets with picnic tables.
Yes, and it does confuse me because I know quite a few years ago when I built a local swimming pool for our community, the building consent said that we must insert a hoist. So I'm not quite sure what's happened to those existing standards or whether they're just peculiar to
have hoists to get into the pools, but they're not putting them in, they're not creating changing places where the hoist can get to a changing table. So for some disabled people who can self-transfer, that's fine. They don't need the changing table or the hoist in the bathroom. But for many disabled people, they can't self-transfer. So we also need a hoist and changing table in the bathroom. And then even if we bring our own equipment, which is problematic but doable, the spaces are too small. We can't fit the hoist and the commode and the wheelchair and 2 people into the small disability bathroom spaces.
No, I understand. Thank you very much. So it's clearly a Building Act issue as well.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I think what you have done is highlighted the fact that while it may be in legislation, it's not enforceable, and there aren't consequences for failure to do so. So really useful submission. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And have a good rest of your day. I think, like I say, very loved your submission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ka kite.
All right, bye.
We now have there's my cat. We now have the submitter, Holly Mead. Turned myself off mute. Hello, Holly. I'm Adriana van Altvorst. We have you here for 10 minutes. Thank you so much for coming by early. Would you like a descriptor of those of us in the room?
That'd be nice.
Great. So we'll try and do this in the same order that we did before, people, so that I don't have to tell everyone who's next. So I'm Angie Warren-Clark. I'm a Labour List MP. I'm based in the Bay of Plenty, so I'm sitting at home in Tauranga. I'm wearing black with fluffy sleeves, blonde hair, glasses. That's me. Hello.
Kia ora. I'm Emily Henderson. I'm the Whangarei MP, and I'm a Labour Party MP. I am a Pākehā woman of 50. I have short grey hair and a green top and big dark glasses.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Liz Craig, Labour List MP based down in Invercargill, and I've got blonde curly hair and I'm wearing an apricot jacket and a white shirt.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Jan Logie, I'm Green Party MP, and my description sounds like a looky-likey for Emily Henderson.
Only you're cooler. She's much cooler.
I'll pretend that's true. Short blonde grey hair, pahia, big glasses, in black today, with a very fine necklace, which is kind of a stone crystal.
Kia ora, Anahila Kanongata Asui Ki. I'm a Labour List MP based in Papakura. I'm wearing black. I've got a pounamu on, and my hair is sort of like a flat afro today, and I'm wearing glasses.
Good morning, I'm Tony Severin, ACT MP based in Christchurch with red long hair with a bluey green shirt on depending on your screen, and I've got the old cathedral as a backdrop behind me.
Talofa, my name is Teresa Ngobi. I am the Labour MP for the Ōtaki electorate. So I'm more Scottish. I have brown hair and brown skin.
Good morning, Maureen Pugh. I'm Nationals List MP. I'm based down on the West Coast in the West Coast Tasman electorate. Today I'm wearing a white, grey and white spotted top. I have glasses and short brown hair.
Right, Holly, thank you for your submission. It's an interesting perspective that you bring to us today. So I appreciate you coming to talk with us. If you're wondering, this is my cat Ziggy. She will be participating quietly, hopefully. So we are in your hands for 10 minutes, Holly. And if you would like to leave time, I can tell you at about 5 minutes. If you'd like to leave time for questions, up to you though. This is your time completely. Ngā mihi nui.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Holly Mead. I'm an occupational therapist in Tamaki Makaurau. I have long red hair, a green top, and sitting inside my home office. My perspective is that I'm an occupational therapist who works within the housing modification sector, both experience in the Ministry of Health system and now the ACC system. It's my job to assess for environmental barriers within a person's home and apply for funding on their behalf for housing modifications. It's part of my role. I also have in the past provided information type to Aotearoa Housing New Zealand on how to make their properties more accessible and so I'm very much in the accessibility and realm. I guess the issues that I'm seeing within the sector are that there's a lack of universal design homes there. And it's so been highlighted in the latest Auckland floods. I have a client in a Aotearoa home who uses a wheelchair, has high needs, and he is currently staying on a caravan on the Aotearoa property that was flooded up to 60 centimetres within the house because there are no accessible houses for him, complicated by the fact that they have pets as well. And so getting a property that is suitable for him is just really hard, especially in an emergency situation, let alone if you're looking for an accessible home just in normal times. So I have clients who I do pre-purchase inspections for ACC to say this home will be suitable, this home won't be suitable, these modifications need to happen. I have done about 4 of them in this year. None of the homes that I have been to have been accessible, and all required access to be modified and bathrooms to be modified. I also come in with the perspective that I have reviewed potential workplaces. One client that sticks in my mind could not get the job that he wanted because he could not get into the property, which was in central Auckland. The property itself had disability bathrooms, but it had no wheelchair access into the property. And on the steps, there wasn't even a handrail. I rang council rang the property owner and the tenants, and nothing happened. Even though it's council's requirement that this property have accessibility, nothing gets done. There's no way for someone to make a complaint and get recourse about it. So this guy lost his job, lost the potential job because he could not get into the building. And they were talking about ridiculous things about lifting him up every day, up the stairs to get up 4 to 6 stairs. It was just ridiculous. So I agree with the Accessibility for New Zealanders bill. I think it's brilliant and it needs to happen. My concerns are that how is setting up this committee going to make any meaningful and practical changes? You know, how is it going to make councils who are not following their own rules follow their rules? How is it going to make it easy for parties to make complaints, to identify where the issues are, and to make people comply with the laws that are already there? And Aotearoa, bless them, have the policy to have universally designed homes. but for all their intents and purposes, I am still going into their new builds and requesting modifications. Their new builds are 2 to 3 stories. That is not accessible. Even if you have level entry through a garage is not accessible, okay? And the bathrooms that they're putting in are barely adequate. They're putting, I've been, at least half the houses that I modify in my work history have been Aotearoa Housing New Zealand homes. You know, and for their population, for the population of people who are going into Aotearoa homes, they are people with high needs, often with disabilities. And and the number of times we have really narrow doorways, showers over baths, 3 to 4 steps into properties. It's just, it's heartbreaking. The number of times I'm going into properties that need to be modified. So have you got any questions for me?
We do, Holly. Thank you so much for your submission. I have to say your perspective is very useful for us. We have 2 questions, one from Maureen and one from Anahela.
Thank you very much, Holly. Can I just ask, in terms of the proposed legislation that we've got in front of us, what would you like to see included in it? You know, so we as a select committee can make a change that would improve it. What do you think it needs to have happen?
At the moment, there's no timeframes, so I'm concerned about there not being any timeframes. And the wording progressively working towards at the very beginning means that nothing will get done. So I've read the occupational therapy, the board's submission to this, and they are recommending, instead of progressively working towards, preventing and removing accessibility barriers, which I agree with. That makes a lot of sense to me. I would like to see in there something built in for notifications for when things happen, and also possibly some sort of, I mean, there needs to be at some stage, I've lost the words, starts with R. It's gone. No, there needs to be some regulation at some stage. Whether it's at this point or later on, there needs to be some specific regulation. I understand that this is just the starting point for the disability ministry, but at some point there needs to be regulations put in place, so there are specific guidelines.
Thank you. We'll come now to Anahela.
Oh, kia ora, Holly. Thank you for your very insightful information. My question is, just as you find these issues with kaingaora, in terms of that system, is there a place where you can lodge what you've seen and how it can affect future builds?
There's no, it's haphazard. So for each housing modification that gets requested, it goes to Kaingaora for their approval. I know that there have been working committees in the past that have dealt with that. I haven't necessarily been part of it, but there's no, from my experience, there's no particular one place that you go to.
I asked that question because just look, looking at the functions of this committee, that do you think that that's something that they could address?
Very definitely, I think so. Yes, yeah, I think they would be one of the parties that this committee should be dealing with very closely and working with very closely. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're just at time, but go on, Jan. Just fighting with my cat here. She's over my papers, so please go.
Thank you. A super quick question. What I was picking up also from your submission, Holly, was a suggestion that there should be an enforcement mechanism based on, just checking that. Thank you.
Yes, very definitely. Otherwise, the rules are already there and they're not being followed. Yeah.
Thank you, Holly. I think you've made some really good recommendations, suggestions, and also a good perspective, which we haven't heard from yet. So thank you so much for that. Look forward to seeing some changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.
We now have Adriana van Altvorst. Sorry, my cat was in the way. Ooh. If we can have Adriana in the room, please.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Adriana. Good to see you again, my friend. Looking forward to hearing from you. We have 10 minutes with you. I know you've done this before, so if you'd like me to, I'll wave out at about 5 minutes to let you know where you're at. But this is your time. Use it as you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. So my name is Adriana van Altvorst, and I am a child advocate and working for Child Advocacy New Zealand. I'm director of that. So I am currently working with a mother. We can learn from her journey. A mother has a son aged 8 or 9, years old, living in the Napier Hawke's Bay area. The boy is on the caseload of the Ministry of Education behaviour team. The boy needs support to learn strategies to manage his behaviour and to relate to others. Effectively, the boy needs help to know, understand and implement the 5 key competencies, which I hope you will look up later. Basically, the best place for children to learn the 5 key competencies is in a school setting with other children and teachers, so they can get a good understanding of what's the best way to behave. Now, the school has a responsibility to teach the 5 key competencies. The boy is achieving X standard for literacy and numeracy despite his problems with his key competencies, so that's a good thing. The boy was on a transition plan to integrate into a school in term 4 2022. He had a term of half days with the support of the behaviour team from the Ministry of Education to build the capacity of the school. Now, nearing the end of the 2022 school year, the boy requested to be like all the other children and attend school like all the other children, like his peers. The mother considered this a reasonable request, so she advocated for her son. She then asked the school and the Ministry of Education caseworker to increase the half days to full days, as she believed the transition plan had an expiry date that is quite reasonable. The school disregarded her requests. Her son's request to attend school like his peers increased in intensity, frequency, and duration. The mother increased her insistence and placed pressure upon the Ministry of Education and the school. Out of sheer frustration, she had a heated discussion on the phone. She is a past
Adriana, I just if you could stay a little bit general, please, so we don't want to specify.
A policeman then served the mother a verbal trespass notice. Police would arrest her before her son and parents if she entered the school grounds. The police informed the mother that the trespass notice was based on the statements made by the Ministry of Education caseworker in the school. I sought generic legal advice. The school and the Ministry of Education are within their rights to serve trespass notices against whānau. They are within their rights to ask the police to serve trespass notices on their behalf. Schools have exercised this right. It may be a common occurrence. I can't comment. I was informed that the best thing in the best interest of the child is to move the child to another school. I queried further and was told the boards hold all the power. You are fighting a losing battle, give up. As Māori, the mother believes that whānau and child are one, therefore her child is also trespassed. Effectively, the mother cannot go onto the school grounds, the child cannot go onto the school grounds, the mother cannot fully and actively participate in her son's education, the mother and son could not attend the beginning of the year school pōwhiri. We saw the trespass notice as a barrier. We informed both Ministry of Education and the school. We requested the removal of the trespass notice to enable the mother and her son to be active participants in the child's education. Legally, right does not equate to what is right using a common sense approach. Given the plethora of research regarding best practices for engaging with Māori, given the intergenerational trauma Māori have faced, and given the information and knowledge we have discovered from the Royal Commission inquiry into abuse in state care, it is the action of serving a trespass notice. I asked the questioner, is the action of serving a trespass notice by a school to whānau involving police right and reasonable given the following information? Her local area, the mother, is highly represented by low socioeconomic Māori involved with gangs. The action denies whānau the right to actively participate in their child's education. The action denies the child the right to engage in school at a time when truancy and transience across Aotearoa, New Zealand is so bad that our Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, had to inject $88 million to address the problem. Active participation and self-determination is their right under Te Tiriti o Waitangi, Accelerating Accessibility, UNCRPD, UNCRC, Enabling Good Lives. Despite all the above documentation, they have no power to protect us. They are as ineffective as dust collectors. They give us false hope because those that hold power disregard them. One last point. As Māori, the mother has also asked that I sit with her in person to support her in mediation. We requested financial support of under $1,000 to cover my cost of travel and a koha for food and accommodation so that I can be with her in person. That is her right as of Māori. They denied our request. They advised the mother to seek support from agencies in the community that she does not trust, and Māori who she does not trust either. She trusts me. Her right as Māori is to have me there. She lives in Terrell. Her whānau face and
Adriana, we're just about at time. I hear your strong advocacy for this family, but it's, as you know, it's very important that we don't have any identifying factors.
I haven't named any names, and I haven't named the legal advice I got it from.
No, I know, but
anybody.
Even specific communities, it may be.
Let's stop that. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, Māori and non-Māori repeatedly face barriers, and this is what I see is in my work as an advocate, right? What is disheartening and painful to face is that even we face hardship and trauma. That even when we face hardship and trauma, as Māori, we have to beg for our rights under Te Tiriti o Waitangi repeatedly, simply because those in power place barriers in our way and expect us to accept the treatment we get. You all have the power to change legislation to break down those barriers. Questions that you need to ask based on what I have shared today. How do we empower any law to ensure that it protects us, the people, the disempowered, especially Māori? Who do we call on to come in to ensure that those in power adhere to the laws? How do we make the law more effective than just dust collectors? Because if it's going to be a dust collector, you might as well not waste your time, because this is costing us money. So, at the grassroots level, I face this as an advocate, and I'm getting a little bit tired, especially from the Ministry of Education, who know, and because I was a teacher, We know about what's the best way to engage with whānau, and the schools do too. So that's my expectation. My expectation is that the government agencies like Ministry of Education, Oranga Tamariki, Ministry of Social Development, and all of those government departments actually follow their laws and do best practice.
Adriana, we are at time and we have no time for questions, but I think you've made your point very well. And very strong advocacy. Thank you.
Can I please send this, because this is additional to what I have shared before, because I've talked about the MSD toilets at Papakura and still don't have those toilets for us. We have to piss our pants or go behind the building to have a piss for the kids. So, you know, thinking about that, I've been talking about that for 30 freaking years.
Yeah, yep. I hear you, Adriana, and I
Thank you,
appreciate
Adriana. I will follow that up again.
Yeah, well, I'm still waiting for those toilets. It's just a lock and a screwdriver. I figured it out how to do it, and just allowing us to go upstairs in the lift to use the toilets upstairs. A very simple solution. Don't make it more harder than it needs to be.
Thanks, Adriana. You have a really good day. Appreciate your advocacy today.
Thank you very much.
Ka kite.
I'll be back one day again.
We'll see you again. Ka kite. We now have Rich Rowley for 10 minutes.
Oh,
hello, Rich.
hello. Sorry, my laptop is. Oh God. Sorry.
No, that's
I might
fine.
be. I'm going to have to be upside down for some reason with not being able to do it. My laptop has two cameras. I'll be upside down.
No, you're up the right way, Rich. We
I
can
am?
see
Oh,
you.
okay.
We can see you. Now we have 10 minutes with you. Thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
I hope it's taken as read. It's a very short submission, so we're looking
Okay.
forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
And would you like a descriptor of who's in the Zoom room?
No, I was just looking. Thank you. I'm all good.
Okay, thanks. We're in your hands, Rich.
Thank you.
I'll wave out at 5 minutes. Is that
Okay,
helpful? Thank you.
Kia ora te whānau, ko hofta me wanga kurante awa kur Atlantic te moana no Ingararia hau, kei tamaki makuru tōku ki anga, ko Rich Rowley hau, ko Ramanda tōku Macau, tōku wha mawata onga, ara ko Reina, rata ko Stevie, ko Leo, ko Ruby, ko rata tanako takatane. I'm Rich. I've lived in New Zealand for nearly 20 years now. I have 4 kids, and they're the reason that I do the work that I do now. So I am neurodiverse. My first diagnosis was at 42 with ADHD. I'm also autistic. I have a lot of wonderfully named comorbidities too. I have 4 children, and the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. 3 of them are neurodiverse, just like me. And 2 years ago, I stopped very lucrative work that I was doing to set up a charity focused on trying to help neurodiverse kids and adults get a better deal out of the world. I was very excited about the new ministry being set up for disabled people. I was slightly underwhelmed at the name of it, but still very optimistic that we'd actually begin to see some real change. I'm trying my hardest not to drop a few F-bombs here as well. I was absolutely gutted when I saw this proposed piece of legislation. If you are neurodiverse, as with any disability, you're disenfranchised by society at every single point. So we're disenfranchised in the education system, the health system, the justice system, and then the whole world of work from recruitment all the way through. It's an ableist world. It's a neurotypical world. And if you're any different, it's like pushing poo uphill. So when I saw that the first piece of legislation to come out of this new Ministry for Disabled People did nothing It had no enforceability. There's nothing to, we've got the Human Rights Act, we've got the Disability Act. They're useless, absolutely useless. And then to be faced with a new piece of legislation that literally just sets up a talking shop. You might have a different perspective on what it does. I used to be a lawyer. I read the legislation. It's setting up a talking shop in my head. It was just absolutely gutting. And I hope that you take this piece of legislation right back to the drawing board and reframe it so that my kids actually get an opportunity to enforce some change in their lifetime. I'm 50 years old, it's too little too late for me, and I've managed to do all right, but I'm a 50-year-old man who has to go to therapy because of the complex stress that I've received by being forced to go through living in a world that doesn't not acknowledge me, doesn't acknowledge my difference. And my kids are still going through that same world now. So I really, really, really would like you to take this awful piece of legislation back to the drawing board and come up with something that's going to have something that's enforceable so that my kids can have a better life. Their kids will be neurodiverse too. This isn't something that you catch. It's a genetic thing. We're here for a bloody reason. The world doesn't acknowledge what that reason is. That's the mahi that I'm engaged on. But we need some enforceability to make organisations, like I say, health, education, justice, and employers, to make them actually change some of their practices that are. We're playing a rigged game, and it's disgusting, and it needs to change. And I don't get cross and upset very often, but I'm really furious about this piece of legislation. So, yeah, thank you for taking the time to listen.
Hey, thanks, Rich. I appreciate your submission. I've got Maureen with one question.
Sure.
And Jan. So I just have a question. So what's the name of your charity, Rich?
My charity is called the Observatory.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we, at the moment, we don't use philanthropy. At the moment, I'm going out. We've designed a neurodiversity certification for business that's really employee experience design. It's about how you make work a better experience for everybody, really, but like the outliers are neurodiverse people. So we're starting there. We want to give our course, we want to give it away free to schools across the world, actually, once we've built it and got enough money to keep it sustained from business. So thank you for asking.
Thank you. Right, Maureen and then Jan.
Thanks very much, Rich. I've got to say it's the first time I've ever heard anyone introduce themselves by saying I'm Rich in whatever context.
Yeah, I'm not, and I don't want to be either.
So it depends on the context. Look, our job as a select committee is to try and improve the bill. You've said send it back to the drawing board. Is there anything salvageable in this piece of proposed legislation that's in front of us now?
Nothing that's important to me or my community, no. Absolutely nothing. When I read it, whoever drafted it, like however much money you've spent on that, you might as well have set fire to it and burnt it.
Okay.
So I'm very sorry if that's upsetting to anybody here. I understand that these things are time and effort, and political stuff's always a compromise, but we've had nothing ever. And it's about time we had something where we could make some change. It's appalling to think that my kids, when they get to my age, are going to be as damaged as I am now. It makes me want to cry.
Jan.
Thanks. And thanks for your really direct, clear communication, Rich. I'm appreciating it. In terms of whatever the next step is, it's coming across really clearly that you've communicated that you want it to be enforceable.
Yes.
And I'm assuming within that you want kind of the development of standards, which others have been calling for, that can then be enforced.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, we've kind of got them already in the Disability Act and the Human Rights Act, but you know, I went down the route. Look, I've got a law degree, I've got a master's, I'm starting a PhD. I'm not a stupid person, right? But I struggle to get information on websites and sometimes engaging with other people. And the legislation says that there's a legal duty on organisations to provide me with information in a format that I can understand. Okay, that's a really simple bit of legislation that already exists. Do organisations do that ever? No. What's my remedy in law? To go through the human rights appeal and get some mediated kind of solution, which is great, but that's just for me. Newsflash, there's a whole community, about 20% of the country has got some kind of neurodiversity. Most of it's undiagnosed because it's such a nightmare trying to get diagnosed. So that's 20% of the population who are having similar problems to me. If I get a remedy, that remedy is unique to just me, like nothing about anybody else. So yeah, it needs clear things that standards that organisations across the board need to be meeting, and enforceability, and also, you know, penalties. They deserve to be actually. You know, there should be financial consequences for not doing this.
Hey, Rich, we're at time now, and I do appreciate your submission. Very heartfelt, but also really relevant and useful as well. So have a good rest of your day, and I'm going to Google your charity and have a look at it. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.
So we now have Deafblind Association of New Zealand Charitable Trust and Don McKenzie, and we have Don and the team, if we have a team, for 15 minutes. Do we have Don present?
Madam Chair, we're having some trouble with promoting Don. What we might do is just use the allow to talk function.
Right. Okay, sure. Hello, Don. We can see that you have joined us on the Zoom, but I understand there are some difficulties with technology at the moment. You're currently on mute. I understand that you might just submit orally to us. We have you for 15 minutes, Don. If you are able to take yourself off mute, so I can make sure you can hear us.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
Fabulous. Thank you, Don. Look, would you like a descriptor of who is in the Zoom room?
No, I've heard it all.
Great.
So I've been with you since 9 o'clock. So that's just fine. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, Don. Look, we have you for 15 minutes. Now, we have your submission here. I note the comments around fair go and just doing it. So let's crack on then. And I'll sing out at about 10 minutes if that's useful, and let you know. So we've got some time for questions, but we are absolutely in your hands.
Yep, jolly
Welcome.
Good. I'll go through the submission, but I'd just like to say, look, I'm a blind person. I'll be using Braille notes. I've been, I'm actually a retired physiotherapist. So I've been on the technical side of disability for a long time, and an advocate since about 1972. So there are none of the stories that I've heard this morning since 9 o'clock that are at all new to me. There are no surprises. It's just the same. Things haven't changed a lot. It's improved somewhat, but it's a snail's pace. We have to do better as a society, for goodness sake. We have to bring New Zealand legislation up to enforceable status in line with Australia, the UK, the USA. There is no reason why, as a civilized Western society, we can't do that. Now, the basis of and I'm representing the Deafblind Association of New Zealand, and I'm making the submission on that organisation's behalf. And the basis of the Deafblind Association submission is that access to public amenities is a core tenet of society. It's about equity, it's about the richness of diversity, and it's about the humanness, the way we treat each other. It's about inclusion. Those are the values that we need to stretch to in interacting with each other and being inclusive. The number of people who are both deaf and blind isn't known. The 2013 census said that 484,000 were either deaf or blind, 180,000 were blind and 340,000 were deaf. Now, with people, with more people living longer and with more children born preterm, and that's even as little as 22 weeks gestation, which is just amazing. Disability rates are likely to rise. The Ministry of Education's learning support figures suggest that enrolments of pretermers is growing. It's hard to gather whether, in fact, the rise in pretermers will also show up in the numbers of delayed or learning impaired people. Impaired learners may not be detected until a child is sort of 7 or 8. These things don't become available, don't become obvious quickly. Firstly, though, turning to my submission itself, I want to say, please keep this bill alive. And I'm talking to the whole of Parliament now, and I note with regret that a number of other parties are not with us this morning. I want to please ask for some cross-party agreement that will bring about an Accessibility Act, because an Accessibility Act is not about disability. Of course, we people with disabilities benefit greatly from it, but it's about the whole of society. Mothers with pushchairs, older people, people temporarily on crutches, people carrying luggage, visitors, all of that sort of thing. Accessibility is a wider issue than just disability, and I think it should be painted in the broader context of society's improvements around amenity. The Deafblind Association represents people who with moderate to severe loss of both hearing and vision combined. We welcome the introduction of the bill. We urge all parliamentarians to find agreement on laws and strategies that banish the barriers preventing disabled people from fully participating in society. Government's 2001 disability strategy said that we want a New Zealand that is non-disabling. So let's get on and stop discriminating against 20 to 25% of the population. We respectfully ask Parliament to make law that treats others as you yourselves would wish to be treated.
That's 10 minutes, Don. Please continue, though.
Gosh, 10 minutes, and I'm nowhere there. Right, well, I'll keep going until you stop me. Good accessibility law will give everyone a fair go so that we can all contribute fully to New Zealand society. Advocacy for inclusion goes back to 1915 when injured soldiers returning from the First World War pleaded for rehabilitation and re-employment. Since then, the war wounded and civilians alike have constantly asked for inclusion and a no-fault, fair go society. Now, just bear with me for a moment because I want to just get to a couple of things before you stop, and I want you to ask me questions. And let's find the right page. Here we go. Now, a few things that here are 8 points. Disability and access is a whole of government responsibility. Working with disabled people's organisations is most likely to result in solutions that stick. Secondly, resources are needed to enable disabled people's organisations to help in policy development, and that's really important. The cultural rights and freedoms of everyone are to be treated equitably. Number 4, a universal design and reasonable accommodations are to be given legal status. 5, please enforce the existing provisions of the 2004 Building Act regarding accessibility. And this is a classic example of how you pass laws, parliamentarians pass laws, but they don't follow them up, they don't enforce them. 6, correct the disproportionate level of poverty among disabled people who are twice as likely to live in poverty as the rest of the community, and disabled Maori are 3 times so affected. Number 7, please fund assistive devices and services that aid communication. And finally, please collect statistics and disaggregated data that reflects the situation of disabled people, including Maori and other minorities. So I'll just leave it at that, and I hope you've got some keen questions.
Thank you, Don. A really good submission. You were reading from some notes, and it would be really useful if we could have a copy of those.
They should be with you.
Right.
Parliamentary services will have them.
Right, thank you, because I certainly just have a very small, much smaller submission to what you were speaking to. We have a question from Dr. Liz Craig.
Thanks, Don. A really, really useful submission. My question was actually around your last point around statistics, and just really what kind of information would you like to see collected, and then how would you like to see that used?
We need to collect statistics about the nature of the disabled population. Who are we dealing with? What range of disabilities are there? But we need to know how existing legislation is being implemented and how it's being applied to what population. We know very little about the disabled population other than the fragmentary occasions when organisations and people such as they have done today have submitted their situation. So I think there is need for the census to start work on digging down into the disability arena.
Okay, thank you, that's useful.
Maureen Pugh, quick question, we are at time.
Okay, very quick question. Thanks very much, Don. you say that you want to keep this bill alive, and you also have some really good suggestions in your written submission about perhaps just picking one or two low-hanging fruit and just getting on and doing it. How would you suggest that we as a select committee can make those changes to this piece of proposed legislation that's in front of us?
Look, it's a huge journey. The bill signals a huge journey, and that has to be broken down, and it will happen over time. And I think we've just got to be really, disabled people have just got to be really patient about all of this. But if they can see things happening, then they will know that progress is being made, and that legislators are on their side making our community more accessible, and that people are not being excluded. And looking at things like transport, like education. Now, you've heard stories this morning about the education. People say, well, look, that's not quite what the law says. So you're wasting your time submitting to us as a local authority. So,
thanks,
and what I'm really saying is that the whole thing needs to be brought down to the local issues, to schools, to health boards, and so on, for compliance.
Thank you, Don. Look, a really good submission, and appreciate you phoning in and having the conversation with us. It's I do see here that you have your speaking notes. I just don't have been submitted to us. I just don't have them in front of me. So my apologies for that. Thank you so much. Great submission, very useful for us. So go well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we certainly have a lot to think about in terms of this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you for hearing me.
So we have the next submitter is David Cullen. I see there you are, David. I see you're in the room. Now, David, would you like a descriptor of those of us here?
No, thanks. That's fine. I'm familiar with everybody.
Great, thank you. We have you for 10 minutes. If you'd like me to remind you at 5 minutes for time, but this time is completely yours. So we're in your hands.
Oh, great. Well, there's a lot to say. Apologies in advance to our awesome NZSL interpreters if I go a little quick. But good morning, Aotearoa, everybody. My name's David Cullen, and I appreciate the opportunity to make an oral submission today. I'm coming to you as a parent and caregiver of a young person who has a sensory impairment and is disabled by barriers that we encounter daily in our beautiful country. For the sake of transparency, I should say that I am employed by Blind Low Vision NZ in an administrative role with the Access Matters campaign, and I'm also a trustee on the board of Blind and Low Vision Education Network New Zealand, the school, and I'm also a member of Parents of Vision Impaired. Obviously, my involvement with those organisations has arisen from the privilege of raising a child with a disability. I'll take my written submission as read, although I will make a quick correction. It's the Ministry of Education that has made some bizarre and inconsistent and arguably inequitable funding decisions, but that's a story for another day. Not the Ministry of Health. Well, the Ministry of Health could use a bit of advice from me too, but that can wait for another day as well. As a parent and caregiver of a 13-year-old blind girl, I want to draw a comparison between our experiences of accessibility in the USA and in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and why I think there's such a difference and how I believe we as a society should respond. So at the end of 2019, our family of 6 had worked hard for the privilege of a month's travel in the States, primarily to visit family and friends. We also made the most of the opportunity as tourists. So here's a few of our accessible experiences as tourists. The Shed Aquarium in Chicago, well, firstly, they have an accessible website. That's a great start, especially if you're using a screen reader, which my daughter does. There's accessible parking. restrooms have braille in them, which is really important for a 13-year-old female to know where she's going for her safety's sake. They have touchable, tactile models, some of which will tell you what you're doing, what you're touching, hands-on displays. You can get in there and touch the starfish and all the rest of it. Pre-recorded audio descriptions of the exhibits, live audio descriptions of the show. So, you know, the dolphins are all jumping around or whatever those funny creatures were called. And there's a person giving you an audio description to headphones so my daughter can enjoy it alongside the rest of us. There's an app that incorporates sighted live guides. And that's just the stuff they have for blind, low vision and deafblind people. There are all manner of other access needs that are catered to. Still in Chicago, the river architecture tour, not something you think a blind person would enjoy, but it was so well described just by a regular guide that my daughter absolutely loved it. It seems that accommodating access needs in the States it's unexceptional. Disabilities part of the architecture, you might say. So moving along to Cleveland, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, awesome time, fully accessible. The kids getting into it, including my daughter, lots of instruments to play. The museums in Washington, the Smithsonian's, you don't need to book an accessible tour. You can just turn up. Again, the guide's very well trained, very comfortable with disability. They confidently and politely ask you if they could be of assistance. They can make recommendations. They'd allow my daughter to touch things that other people couldn't necessarily touch. And of course, they could expertly describe the displays. One of our best experiences was probably at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, where, again, very accessible. And my daughter was given a 1-hour individualized guided tour with an expert audio describing historian. So that included permission for her to touch and tactile explore many of the exhibits, under exhibition, of course. But these included ancient Greek sculptures. We're talking thousands of years old, so hands all over them. And as you can imagine, there was as much of an anatomy lesson there, given the way the Greeks didn't used to dress, as there was history and art. Along to Broadway, productions are audio described. You don't have to go along to a special session. So along we go to Aladdin, good times. So encouraging in Central Park to see dismount and walk signs, and they're specifically targeting skateboarders. We all love skateboarders, but e-scooters and cyclists. These people are dangerous on footpaths. They shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be there in New Zealand, please. So very encouraging to see that level of consideration. Of course, public transport includes audio descriptions, all the stops on the subway. Up to Boston, Perkins School for the Blind, as you can imagine, Helen Keller fame. Brilliant tour, tactile heaven. My daughter just loved it. Over to Niagara Falls. We're now in Canada, in Ontario. Make a note of that province. Again, very accessible. Down to LA, Disneyland, Fantasyland, of course, but boy, larger than life. Even the toilet cleaners can come up to you and tell you what a blind person is going to enjoy at Disneyland. And even the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars land has braille on the exit signs. So, you know, Han Solo, should he go blind, would know how to get off it. It seems that disability just disappears in Disneyland. And I should say, I'm not asking for some sort of utopian fantasy Disneyland. We all know it's fake. We all know there's homeless people sleeping on the bus stops as soon as you walk out the door there. But we simply want accessibility law enshrined in law here in New Zealand. And this is the mechanism that the states have used. And America is a country that many Kiwis love to hate. We think they're inferior to us on so many levels. And yet, look what they have managed to achieve. So contrast this with some typical experiences in New Zealand. Okay, let's go to the movies as a family. Can my daughter access the audio description soundtrack for this movie? Blank stares, rising panic, uncomfortable glances. Don't look at the blind girl. Oh, shuffle, shuffle, call the manager. You know, 10 minutes later, someone comes out with a pair of headphones and says, here, push this button, it'll boost the hearing loop. Well, that's great if you're hard of hearing. Not so good if you're blind. Even better is, oh, sorry, sir, this movie doesn't have captions, doesn't have subtitles. Like, what? Where do they train these people? Where do we get people from that have no concept of how to deal with disability? And the pity is we know the audio description for that movie soundtrack exists because in America, they legally have to produce it before they can release a movie. So that's a frustration. Okay, let's go to the museum, you know, the one our rates pay for, which is a place I personally love, by the way. But is your latest exhibit accessible? Can a blind person, you know, even with some gloves on, feel what's going on? No, the exhibit's all behind glass cases. But we do have a recorded audio on our website. Oh, so we could just stay home and listen to the audio there and save ourselves the trouble of not being able to access one of your mobility car spaces because they're unmonitored and unpermitted people are parked there. And then we have to navigate all the e-scooters and e-bikes dumped all over the footpath just to get to the entrance, wondering where the braille signs are, if there are any at all, in the elevator, in the bathrooms. The list of barriers goes on. So what's the difference between accessibility in the USA and in Aotearoa, New Zealand? Well, I think the difference is robust, enforceable, sensible accessibility legislation. The Americans with Disabilities Act was introduced in 1990. That's 33 years ago. That's more than a generation of implementing accessibility in the USA, which means it's pervaded their culture in that time. It's people's attitudes, their culture. It's been affected. It's not just braille signage and ramps instead of steps. It means that people accept and accommodate access needs much more readily. Same thing in Ontario and Canada, where the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act was introduced 18 years ago by somebody you'll hear from later on today. So I think that thanks to relevant and genuine legislation, accessibility is becoming the norm in these countries, and it's in thought and word and in deed. What's more, the Americans with Disabilities Act was introduced not by a bleeding heart, liberal, progressive, kind social justice warrior from the left, but by a right-wing, small government, big business, capitalist Republican, President George Bush Sr. So if President Bush can get it right last century, then why can't we in our supposedly inclusive, diverse and equitable 21st century paradise?
David, we're at time now,
Sure.
but I think you've made your points very well. And if you have further that you want to say, you are welcome to put a supplementary submission in, or your reading notes in as well. You're most welcome to.
Okay, great.
I want to thank you for the comment about the movies in New Zealand, and about the fact that for want of equipment, these movies are made appropriately and can be shared with people.
Oh yeah.
So
the ADA means you can't release a movie in the States without that soundtrack there. It's just that we don't make it available in New Zealand.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. Look, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. And if you can share your notes with us, that would be awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Ka kite. We now have Sacha Dylan ready to join us in the. Hello, Sacha.
Hello.
Hello. Now we have you for 10 minutes, Sacha. Would you like me to give you a 5-minute prompt to say how long we've been in the meeting?
No, I should be fine. I may not need 10 minutes.
Right. And would you like us to give you a descriptor of who's in the Zoom room?
I can see it myself, right. So thank you.
Thank you. We're in your hands.
Thank you. Look, I won't go into a lot of the things that other submitters will have already told you about the deficiencies in the draft bill. I think what I wanted to emphasize is a couple of things that I put in my written presentation that other people might not have touched on. I'm thinking of your role as a committee in explaining this to your colleagues in a way that gets their support, and to other stakeholders that may be affecting the process of turning this into a law. My experience working with councils, particularly in the Auckland region, and doing a lot of strategic work around how to get people thinking about disability differently, kind of brought home to me that a lot of what's coming out of the disability movement after the UN Convention is very focused on human rights. And that's a perspective that kind of makes sense when you're sitting in Parliament or you're sitting in some of those Wellington-based agencies. But it really does not resonate with some of the more pragmatic cultures in places like councils. If you look at the recent flood responses, you'll see that face of councils is actually reflective of the culture inside them. There are a lot of people who go out in storms and fix things. They're engineering oriented. What they want to see is some clear standards they can refer to. So they're just looking for something quite practical. But for you to make the argument that they should take this on as well as everything else they're doing, you need to spin a better story than because these people have rights. So one of the things I would encourage you to look at doing is to ask of agencies like Whaikaha that they put a fair amount of effort into public awareness campaigns that underpin a lot of the persuasion that's needed. We've been asking for this for the last 20 years, at least. And there's been a begrudging token kind of effort. When Tariana Turia was the minister, there was like $1 million a year. That was basically frittered away by people in MSD who used it to plug funding gaps in community organisations. When some of the funding was reduced, they used it as like a funding pool for that. And with the best will in the world, it didn't really achieve what we were asking them to as a movement. So I guess that's one thing I just wanted you to hear, because I wasn't sure if someone else would raise that. I respect the position you're in as legislators, that you have quite a tricky path to tread, because you may believe in this, but it's not your belief in this that's going to get it across the line. And I really do encourage you to, if this is not going to be turned into law before the election, and I'm taking Warren Forster's word that it probably won't based on his experience, what I would like you to consider is leave the best version of this law that you can waiting for the next term of Parliament to pick up. I don't want to see a watered down waste of your time like the current bill. I don't think that reflects well on any of you. I doubt that any of you would like that to be part of your parliamentary legacy, having your name attached to turning an ambitious law that you've had 5 years worth of dedicated engagement and expertise to help you on into something that doesn't even need to be a law, as other submitters have said. So that's kind of my challenge to you, I guess, is be a bit braver with this, but also look at the big picture and be honest with us about the constraints, because I think you'll also find there's a fair amount of naivety about what's achievable from your position. And we need more of that kind of civic leadership type engagement as a community before we can play our part. It's been a privilege for me to be a strategist working in this area, so I take a longer term view, but it also burned me out working within that council space. I did a lot of the prep work that turned into, for example, the B project. I worked with Minnie for 7 years on that. And there's a lot of things like that that are part of the answer. But I think this accessibility law, when you look at the Canadian examples you've been shown, when you read the stuff from Warren Forster, the Law Commission report and so on, it's really clear what's needed. It's not a mystery. There's nothing particularly special about it. And you don't need to hear from every disabled person in New Zealand before you kind of know what you need to know as leaders to help play your part in making this happen. And finally, what I would say is what I've noted towards the end of my written submission, something that I was working on a lot of the time in council was the economic development potential of creating a whole sector of stuff that New Zealand is very well placed to lead the world in this. If you do a good job of your part, there is a potential industry sector sitting there waiting to happen of disabled people being able to go out into the rest of the world as experts and consultants and bring back revenue for New Zealand and create pride and opportunity for our whole community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sacha. We have enough time for one question from Jan Logie.
Kia ora, thanks for thoughtful submission. I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more in terms of the reasons for your support around the Warren Forster's proposal and the research behind that, and yeah.
I'm very simply because I respect the expertise. When I read that a couple of years ago, I thought this person has obviously done their homework. They know what they're talking about. It has all of those ingredients in it that are needed to make a system like this work. My day job is quality systems management at the moment. You need standards to make that kind of thing happen, but you also need a process around the standards to respond to change over time, and also to prove to people that you're taking exceptions seriously, that there's a feedback loop of people's engagement with the system. There is no reason why disabled New Zealanders will have any faith in a system where you say, look, we've set it up now, here's the standards, and then walk away. The other architecture that Warren Forster and others have described is a really important part of the process. This bill does not go far enough, because setting up a committee with no teeth is not going to give people confidence enough to use the system, and we're all wasting our time.
Thank you, Sacha. That's probably a good note to end on. Appreciate your very thoughtful submission.
Thank you.
Matiwa.
Cheers.
We now have Margaret Stefanitsis. I may have just badly bungled that Margaret's name. Hello, Margaret. I can see you there on the screen. If you'd like to turn your camera on and your sound on. Hello, Margaret. My apologies. I think you probably need to give me a pronunciation of your surname. And we have you for 10 minutes. So if you
I've lost it.
Can you hear okay, Margaret? We can hear you fine. We can hear you fine, Margaret, if you'd like to speak.
Hello, I'm just trying to get in. I was in and it just popped out.
We can hear and see you, Margaret.
All right then. Well, I shall just speak, and you know you had a fleeting glance of what I look like.
Yes, we can see you, Margaret.
Oh, fine, thank you. Good morning to you all. Now, read the Accessibility Act for New Zealand. I don't support it in its present form because it claims the purpose is to accelerate progress for disabled people to have an equal opportunity to achieve their goals and aspirations. The Act binds the Crown to what? To set up a committee. That doesn't require an Act of Parliament. New Zealand ratified the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities on the 25th of September 2008. To draft the convention, an ad hoc committee was sent up, which negotiated for 4 years until agreement was reached in a draft text drawn up as the basis of the convention. Act 9 of the convention, Article 9 actually, is accessibility, and that is my particular interest. It has the same purpose as the intended Act, but it states that measures must be taken to ensure equal access and to set out how these are to be achieved. I would have liked to see a committee set up first, possibly called Accessibility Advisory Committee, following the same lines as the CRPD ad hoc working group, with all the information that has been collected from various New Zealand reports over the last year, 8 years in fact. First that I came across was the Militis report of 2014, commissioned by the Office for Disability Issues. It did a survey, and the report was excellent, covered so much of what was required for the Act. The next came the New Zealand Disability Strategy, 2016 to 2026, also produced by the Office for Disability Issues. It was produced in 8 outcomes, very sensible, the fifth of which was accessibility, which listed as its priorities to increase the accessibility of disabled people and to implement an accessibility plan for public buildings. Then came the Accessibility Charter, 2018, again from the Office for Disability Issues. After which we got, in 2019, the Disability Action Plan, which took us through to 2023, again from the Office of Disability. It's a wealth of information on which to produce a working draft of an Accessibility Act. There's a wealth of information. In 2021, after the first draft of the Accessibility for New Zealanders Act was produced, Access Alliance was so surprised at its content that they wrote a set of key principles which they felt should have been in the Act. And the first was that it identified the target population. And then it sets a timeline, a bar, a policy. It imposed obligations, requires proaction, places government responsibility, a complaint enforcement, places funding compliance, compels the government review, and it demands enforcement mechanisms. I'm not saying that New Zealand has not made progress in promoting the rights of people with disabilities, because it has. However, when developing legislation, enforceable law must result, not just another code. I thank you all for your time. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Margaret. A very good submission, and thank you for outlining the reports. I have Maureen Pugh with a question.
Thanks very much, Margaret. I really appreciated that timeline too, which I think demonstrates that, you know, there is and has been over many years a lot of advice.
Yes, yes, there has been.
Yes. So I'm just wondering what your recommendation to this select committee would be about the proposed legislation, the bill that we are considering at the moment. What would your suggestions be for us?
My recommendation would be that it is actually a bill, not advice to us that a committee was going to be set up. I just think in the last 8 years, and the fact that we've ratified and been reporting to the Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities for 8 years, that we have enough information already to set up a bill, an Act of Parliament, which gives us most of the key principles which the Access Alliance have suggested. And again, those could be debated through the select committees to actually producing a really good bill, which would give all disabled people faith in our system. But at the moment, they're so disillusioned over the fact that another committee is going to be set up, and they just are so disappointed.
So just to be clear, you would like, so those key principles, etc., those enforceability standards and timelines to be included?
They're not, as far as I'm concerned, they're not set in stone, but something of that nature, an act, not a proposal to set up a committee. That was my disappointment, along with many others.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. We have come to time. Really appreciate your submission, very useful. And we look forward to hearing from you perhaps another time. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, and to you all as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Committee, we come now to Mary Schnackenberg. We have Mary present. We can see you on screen there, Mary. If you'd like to turn your camera on and take yourself off mute, it would be helpful. Are you there, Mary? Clarks, if you could have a... Oh, hello, Mary. You're off mute now.
Right.
Wonderful.
And I'll try and turn on my camera. Just hang on a second.
It's fine if you can't find where that is. So Mary, while you're doing that, welcome to the Social Services Select Committee. Would you like a descriptor of those of us who are in the Zoom room?
Yes, please.
Great. We're going to go, team will keep to the same order that we're in. So for, my name's Angie Warren-Clark. I'm the chair of the Social Services Select Committee. I'm based here in the Bay of Plenty, so I'm sitting at home in Tauranga, and I am wearing a black top with fluffy sleeves.
Don't worry about those descriptors, that's just fine.
Okay.
I still haven't just try and turn the video on. Sorry.
That's quite all right. A few people have been just submitting with just the sound on, so it's up to you if you'd like to turn your camera on or not. But we're quite happy to just hear your submission, and time is ticking on, Mary.
All right. In my submission, I've said that I oppose the bill as it's currently drafted, and I call for the bill to be rewritten in collaboration with the disability community. I can't find even a wet bus ticket in the current bill to tap somebody on the wrist for all the things that are really sadly going wrong. The alternative, however, for you is to write into the bill powers of investigation about accessibility issues, and also consequences by way of penalties for public and private entities who continue with their accessibility discrimination. I will recap just briefly on one example that I gave in the submission, and I'll give you an update on it. It's 6 years since the team I was on went to mediation at the Human Rights Commission with Auckland Transport. Auckland Transport honestly agreed that they were treating blind people differently from sighted people. That is, they agreed that they were discriminating against me. Auckland Transport did fix 2 of our 4 issues, but I still can't flag down the bus I want to catch. And the next stop announcements have not yet been rolled out across the entire bus network. One of their senior managers told me that if we went to the Human Rights Review Tribunal, Auckland Transport would argue that they're making progress. And they will get round to fixing these issues, but well, the question is when. A different Auckland Transport manager also said, now you need to keep reminding Auckland Transport about your issues, about your needs. Now, under the Human Rights Act, public entities such as Auckland Transport are held to a higher standard than private entities. And despite this, Auckland Transport has not yet fixed these 2 issues that we went to mediation about 6 years ago. And of course, we know that the entire country is struggling with the costs of rebuilding after the flood events, which will cause reprioritization of budgets. So I have a question for you as a committee. How long must we wait? How long must we wait? So thank you very much for listening, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about my submission that you may have.
Thank you, Mary. Really appreciate your submission. I just have a question. You haven't raised it around alt tags that you've talked about in your written submission. I guess the question is, when you download and there is no alternative definitions or alt tags on these documents, and you submit them in to wherever they're being submitted to, are they accepted by those organisations, or is this another barrier to being able to use an online system?
It's a barrier to using an online system. That specifically what I was talking about was that the graphics that I am seeing that don't have alt tags are the graphics that government and other entities are using to prove their authenticity. So it's a bit like in the old days, I used to be a librarian, and so you had the title, the author, and the publisher, and the graphic, the logo of Department of Internal Affairs, for example, whoever it might be, that logo is like the publisher statement, and it's the logo that gives authenticity to the document, that says where it came from. Without the alt tag, that even if all it contains is the Department of Internal Affairs and its Māori name, or whichever government department it is, some of them do work, absolutely, but not all. And that's around the authenticity, just proving the authenticity. And there's even a trick, a problem where sometimes members of Parliament will write to individuals replying to something, and they might want to prove that they actually read the reply. It wasn't just some sort of official reply. So they put a handwritten note on the document. Now, unless care is taken, it may be that the person at the other end may not even be aware that that handwriting is on the document. So we've got a long way to go for access to information. I suppose I chose the Auckland transport issue to talk about because we actually have tried the Human Rights Commission. We've done our best, and we keep telling them, and it makes no difference. And even if we tell them very, very politely, without going out into the public arena and shouting and carrying on, still makes no difference. And that's my sadness.
Thanks, Mary. We've got a couple of people waiting for questions. So if we could move to Dr. Liz Craig, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, for a really useful submission. A number of submitters have raised similar issues around the issues of blind passengers accessing particularly bus transport. What's your understanding of what's best practice? Have you seen any examples overseas, or is there any examples in New Zealand that are best practice in terms of that passenger journey? And what do you think should be put in place?
The first thing the system needs is a totally accurate positioning of the bus. So wherever it happens to be, and it needs to be absolutely real time, so that you can signal the bus Auckland Transport Service, or the Transport Service, maybe using an app, maybe using a phone if you're not a smartphone user, and say, I want to catch bus X. I'm standing at bus stop Y, and the time that I think the bus is coming along is 10 to 12. So would you please tell the driver to stop for me? Now, this is possible overseas. There are really good examples, but when we first started with Auckland Transport about this, they admitted that they didn't know where their buses were. They do now, and you need to know within a matter of a metre or so exactly where each bus is along the route that it is travelling on, so that it's not just about being able to signal the driver that there's a blind person waiting at the next stop that they're coming up to. It's also about the next stop announcements, the triggering of those announcements. But I guess the question is still, how long must we wait?
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. We are at time, but very quickly, Maureen, if you have a question.
Mary, thanks very much for your submission. I note in your written submission, you also talk about the prioritisation of the advisory or the accessibility committee. How do you suggest that they prioritise any of the recommendations that may come out of that group?
I'm really pleased I won't be on it. I don't have a clear view about how they should prioritise it. What usually happens is that they go after the biggest number of people that will be helped, which means that the smallest number of people will go to the back of the queue. I think that's really difficult. I think we need to remember the human rights. We each have individually as well as collectively a right to access our environment safely.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're now at time, Mary. Really appreciate your submission, and very useful to have that actual example of using a system to try and support accessibility. So thank you for that, Mary. Really appreciate you coming before us today. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
So we come now to Access Matters Aotearoa Trust. We have, I think I'm looking, we have Amy Hogan in the room, and I think we're having Diane Rogers as well.
We're having Rebekah Graham, who's my co-chair.
Right, thank you. So is Rebekah coming in shortly?
She's just coming
yes.
in now.
Right, wonderful. Okay, Amy, you've no doubt, hello Rebekah, welcome. No doubt you've done this before, Amy, and really looking forward to hearing your submission. We have 15 minutes with you. Yes. At about 10 minutes, I will button and let you know the timing. Yes. You can continue to use the time as you will, and speak for that entire time. But if you'd like to leave time for questioning, please do so. Now, would either of you like a descriptor of the members in the Zoom room?
No, thank you. We're fine.
Great, thank you. We're completely in your hands. Ngā mihi nui kia korua, welcome.
Kia ora. My name is Amy Hogan, and I'm here with my colleague Rebekah Graham, and we are the co-chairs of Access Matters Aotearoa. Our work here today is as a pan-disability organisation who are working to make the best of this bill and to give as much opportunity for individuals to feed and input onto the bill as it stands and to prepare things for the future. We believe, as has been carefully laid out by previous submissions, that we are kaitiaki and guardians of so many stories about accessibility from all over the disability community. We come from a blind perspective, we come from physical access needs, we come from disabilities around learning, and all of these have access fundamentally at their heart. If we can't access ability, we can't access the information. If we can't access the information, we can't access the building. So access is very much beyond simply putting a ramp on the side of a building. And we want to reinforce the previous submission that we're not asking to be entirely punitive. We're not saying that we're going to go down to the local mom and pop cafe and say, we're going to shut you down because you don't have a perfectly angled ramp and that's it, you're writing out. What we're asking for is for this bill that everybody has worked hard on to be the starting point beyond all the information that you've already heard about our obligations to the New Zealand Disability Strategy, our obligations to the UN. We need to have a pathway to make access three-dimensional, to make access meaningful, not only for the current disabled citizen, but for the disabled citizens of the future. The classic joke is that everybody comes to disability at some point. I just came to it earlier than everyone else. So if I could pass on to my colleague Rebekah to expand on a few points.
Thanks, Amy. My name's Rebekah Graham, and I'm here in my role as co-chair for the Access Matters. We were also, like Amy, involved with Access Alliance in developing the bill, and I think it is one of our greatest disappointments that what we asked for as part of the Alliance has not been put into the bill. And what we asked for was a regulatory mechanism or some form of enforcement so that there was a way to make access happen. As you've heard this morning, there isn't currently a regulatory framework or a mechanism for following that up. So it just gets put in there, oh, that would be nice. Like, nobody ever says, oh, we don't want disabled people to have access. Everybody always says, yes, this is important. Yes. But when it comes to putting it in, it's always, oh, well, you know, we've only got so much money, or, oh, you know, we need to do these other things first, or, oh, you know, so it's always excuse after excuse, and it never actually, you know, gets done. And the other thing that we are aware of, a little controversial, but I'm going to put it out there, our experience is that it's not businesses that are the problem here. Businesses we have found to be incredibly supportive. They love the idea of access. They know that it increases their customer base. They are far more behind it than government departments are. And certain departments really struggled to support the bill. It was a huge challenge getting it across the line. And one of those reasons is that it was actually ministries and government workers in there that did not want to do this work. And that is so heartbreaking to hear. Like, I think government should be, and particularly ministries, should be world leaders. You know, they should be leading the pack. They should be the ones setting the example. They should be the ones absolutely advocating for their people. And it was one of just a real heartbreak to understand that the challenge politically was deemed too hard. And so, as Amy has said, what we would really like is for you guys as select committee to recommend some changes to the bill, to progress the bill, to get it in there, to get it in Parliament, but for it to be the beginning of the conversation and for it to continue to be reviewed regularly in terms of how are we regulating it, how can we regulate it better, what do we need to do, those real practical things. And I really, I'm talking with Amy, she made a lovely, lovely comment about we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And what Amy meant about that was we can do more than one access at a time. Like, we're not limited to just, oh, we're just going to make sure that we have braille on bus stops. We can do a whole raft of things across a whole range of ministries all at the same time in order to provide access. So we have made our presentation super short because we wanted to give heaps of time for questions because we thought some of you might have lots of questions and 15 minutes isn't very long. So if you have questions, you guys have got 8 minutes, maybe 9 minutes for questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both for a great submission. Look, you've got so much information in here, so thank you. It's been, it's very, very useful and helpful to have it all in the one place. So I'm interested in if you could just speak a little bit around the 3 versus 5 year review, and just how you've come to 3 years rather than a 5 year process, or the reasoning for that. Thank you.
A couple of things there. 1, 3 year is a government term, and so it pushes every government that is in government to have to review it and to make changes. It can't be shifted off for whoever's next. But also, when you think about a 3 year review, by the time it's reviewed, you've made your recommendations, those recommendations get implemented, it ends up being closer to 5 years. And I think it's really important to understand that a review process isn't just the time between reviews, it's the time from the review to the implementation. And having it at a 3 year one means that in practical terms, it will end up being 5 years by the time the changes get implemented. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Great, that's really clear, thank you. I'll come now to Jan Logie.
Tēnā kōrua, thanks for a great submission. I'm interested in a couple of points. So one, I'm hearing you've at the end, you're saying you support the bill subject to the inclusion of extending the scope to PCBUs, a 3 yearly review, timely accountability to House of Reps, enforceable, accessible standards, independent regulator, barrier notification, disputes resolution process. So thank you for that, super clear communication. Do you think that's achievable before the election for us to make a bill with all of those changes in that time frame? That's the first question. There might be follow-on.
I guess it depends how committed Parliament is to this bill. It would be, it is entirely possible to write something and get it through, and Diane, all credit to Diane who pulled together a lot of that information, she's amazing. There is stuff that already exists that we can use in terms of legislation. I mean, Warren Forrester's done a heap of work there. There is already stuff there, you don't have to start from scratch, that you could use if you were committed to getting the bill across and making it meaningful.
And also, we are experts at being disappointed, so it wouldn't surprise us if it doesn't progress, but we can be hopeful. We're doing all this work on the presumption that something will get across.
Thank you. If I could, just as a kind of a follow-up, I also noted that is a clear point around Warren Forster's research and having a base there that's considered the legal context here. You also, in the earlier part of your written submission, saying you think it's essential that New Zealand is fully accessible by 2035. I'm wondering whether you also support a change to have a clear purpose with that time frame in it, as well as the other things that you mentioned.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Right, we'll move on to Dr. Liz Craig.
Okay, well, thank you both for a really comprehensive submission. In your written submission, you talk about access denied diaries, and I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that and how you're sharing that information, with people at the moment, and in the new, looking ahead, how you'd like to see that sort of dealt with in future in terms of having a plug-in point with decision makers or people who are thinking about accessibility, about how those experiences could be sort of shared more formally.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was a great initiative because we understood when we were doing work last year that actually a lot of able-bodied people are completely clueless when it comes to access barriers. Like because they don't experience them, they don't know. And it was just a way to showcase really clear, specific examples that people experience and to show how easy it is to get that information. Like you could literally set up a website where people could report their barriers, real easy. It wasn't hard to do.
It wasn't a lot of work. I mean, it wasn't a lot, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, it was quite a simple thing to do. We wanted to show that it's really easy to identify barriers if you provide a way to do it that's accessible, where people can just put in, this is the barrier, this is what happened to me, this is where it was. And it would be amazing if we could do that on a regular part, so that then government has a whole host of stuff that you can see straight away. Oh, this is a common barrier. We don't have braille at bus stops. Nobody knows when the bus is coming. We don't announce bus stops. Audio, using audio, so nobody knows where to get, like, and then you've got a whole list of different things that you can work on simultaneously. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Okay, no, that's really useful. Thank you for that.
You're on mute. Oh, sorry. Is that me, Angie?
Sorry.
You're on mute.
I said Maureen, and then if we have time, I'll have a further question. Sorry, everyone.
Amy, I know you said that your experts are being disappointed, and so to avoid that, and also taking into account your comment about walking and chewing gum, Rebekah, if we were able, how would you suggest that we embed in this bill that will become legislation the priorities for the Accessibility Committee to start work on? Or do you think it's enough to enable them to set the priorities, which is basically what the bill does? But to your point, it's going to be years before that's actioned. So do you think it would lock it in if it was able to be embedded in this particular piece of legislation? And how would you go about setting those priorities?
You go, Rebekah.
I think that's a really interesting question, because when I talk with, when we listen to what disabled people are saying, they're not saying we want you to set priorities. They're saying we just want some action on something. God damn it, anything. Good God, gravy, please, for the love of God. And I think that asking to set priorities is a real able-bodied thing, because that's how we work. But if you think about what disabled people are saying, they have talked again and again and again about information being accessible. I mean, we saw that with the civil defence recently with the floods. The civil defence should have been able to provide their information in accessible format. They did not. They didn't even know how to communicate with the very excellent systems that we already have set up to produce accessible formats. They didn't know who to talk to. They didn't know that you could talk to, like, there's a whole department. You just have to literally email them and say, hey, we need some accessible formats, and da 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 da. So that, again, it already exists and it's there, but because it's not a value, nobody bothered to follow it up. So I don't know if it's about setting priorities per se, as it is about saying our expectation is that all governments will do X, Y, Z, provide accessible information, have accessible websites, and that all our new builds, for example, the built environment's often huge. So we already have building standards around accessibility, but they're not enforceable. And that's a real challenge. Like, you could literally just enforce the standards we already have, and that would be a massive step forward.
Thanks, Rebekah and Amy. We have actually come to time now. Really appreciate your submission and all the written detail as well. I know there's a lot of thought gone into this, so we really appreciate it, and we have heard you. So thank you so much. Ka kite.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, they want to promote me to be a panelist. Can you grab the grab the mouse and click whatever has to, oh no, that says, is there something to click to accept?
Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
It's David Lepofsky. Can you hear me? Can you?
Yes,
it's David.
David.
Okay,
Hello.
and can you see me?
Yes, we can both see and hear you,
excellent.
David.
Excellent.
Sorry,
Thank you.
that was entirely my fault. Somehow I got thrown out of the public session and then got added back into the public session. So thank you so much for coming before us today. We have you for 15 minutes. Please take your very thorough submission as read, and we're in your hands. Would you like to know at 10 minutes, the time at 10 minutes, so you could leave time for questions? Or
yeah, I'm good. I'll be following. I'll be tracking time. I want to thank you all for the privilege of coming to your beautiful country. I'm a volunteer and guest of Blind Low Vision New Zealand, and it is a privilege to be here. My name is David Lepofsky. I'm blind. I am a lawyer. I am a law professor, and I've spent much of the past 3 decades as a volunteer leading campaigns for accessibility legislation, first in the province of Ontario and then helping at the federal level as well. I've also had connections with people involved in similar activities in Israel and other countries, and I hope to share that collective expertise with you. You have a beautiful country. You have amazing and resilient people. You have people who I believe would want to do the right thing when it comes to accessibility legislation. I want to give you a completely candid and honest assessment of the bill before you. It is good that it is now undisputed here that people with disabilities in New Zealand face accessibility barriers throughout their lives. And it is good that the government, and I believe all of you, accept that legislation is needed to change that. The problem is that this bill, among all the accessibility bills I have seen in my country and elsewhere, sadly ranks among the weakest I have seen anywhere. And I believe the people of New Zealand would want and can do much better. I encourage you to look at this bill and ask yourselves and ask your colleagues, do we believe that an advisory committee is all New Zealand needs and is the best that it can do for all people with disabilities? Do you believe that at this point in time, that's all you can do? That's all you should do. If you don't believe that, then make this bill better. Let me offer you a couple of very quick thoughts. First, you've heard the agenda for reform. You've heard it over and over, and there is an incredible unity of message you are hearing because New Zealand has incredible leaders in its disability rights movement. They are not people who agree with each other on everything, but they certainly agree on this. The second thing is the government does not need more advice. Why, I could tell you the last time I had the privilege of being a guest in this country over 4 years ago, the message you are hearing in these hearings is the message I gave to senior staff at the Ministry of Social Development. And if you want, I can send you a link to the audio of the hour and a half where I presented the measures that you're now hearing are needed to them. It is not that you need more advice. It's the government must now act on that advice. Creating an advisory committee for which you do not need legislation, why, that's just a way of saying we're not going to act. And I believe that the people of New Zealand would want to do more than that. Let me next talk to the issue of cost. When you talk about accessibility and accessibility legislation, the question may come to your mind, well, can we afford it? Let me answer that. And the answer is you cannot afford this bill. You can't afford this bill because it does nothing to actually tear down barriers facing people with disabilities. Let me tell you the cost of this bill. The cost of this bill is leaving in place all the barriers in your tourism sector that will deter upwards of 1 billion tourists with disabilities from coming here. I think New Zealand would be financially better off if they came here and spent their tourism dollars here. That is a cost you are paying with this bill. A cost of this bill is the burdens on people with disabilities of having to fight the barriers they face one at a time. That is an incredible cost to dump on vulnerable people with disabilities in this country. But this bill makes New Zealanders pay that cost. A cost of this bill is burdening obligated organizations, whether the government of New Zealand or schools or municipalities or private businesses. It burdens them with the cost of having to each reinvent the accessibility wheel and figure out what they need to do one at a time. That is a wasteful, duplicative cost that would be reduced, if not eliminated, by enacting strong and effective accessibility standards. I think New Zealanders would prefer not to have to be burdened with that additional cost. And strong legislation, like you're hearing from witness after witness, would achieve the goal of reducing or eliminating that cost. So my view is you've got two choices. Either run up the cost to New Zealand by passing a weak bill that does nothing or no bill at all, or reduce costs to New Zealanders, indeed make accessibility a moneymaker for New Zealand by passing the strong legislation that you've been encouraged by so many to do. Let me conclude by offering you what I would call a down payment. I share the view of those who've come before you that because your officials know fully what is needed, you could convert this bill in the next 8 weeks into a strong bill that could be passed before the election. But one down payment on that, and it's not all you need, and I don't mean payment in the way of money, but putting legislation where your intent is, would be to do two things, just as a start. Now, these are not the only things I recommend, but I'm going to gamble you'd all agree on this. First, how about requiring that not $1 can be spent of public money ever again to create new accessibility barriers? How about obliging the government, both nationally and locally, to ensure that when they spend money on infrastructure or they give money for grants or loans, that none of that money is ever used to make things worse? Who could oppose that? Second, how about requiring in your universities and your post-secondary educational facilities programs that anyone trained to be a design professional or an information technology professional, that they need to be trained as part of that in accessible design? If they're going to learn to design a building, they should learn how to design, they should be required to learn how to design an accessible building. And similarly, if they're going to be designing websites and web applications, they should be trained as part of that to design accessible web applications and websites. If you do that, you'll not only better serve your public, but you'll have a cohort of access design professionals who can also sell their skills abroad right from here, which will be great for New Zealand internationally and financially. I hope these ideas help. I welcome the opportunity to take your questions. I'm in your beautiful country till Thursday morning, and anything I can do while I'm here as a volunteer of this campaign, I would welcome the chance to do. Thank you so much for the privilege of being able to speak to you.
Thank you so much, David. Exceptional submission. Really appreciate you taking the time to come to our country. We have a question from Dr. Liz Craig.
Thank you, David. It was a really amazing and comprehensive submission. In your written submission, you also talk about us learning from Canada's successes and our mistakes. What would be your advice thinking through some of the Canadian experience in terms of, once you actually get to the stage of implementing legislation that New Zealand should be aware of as we move forward?
I am not here by any stretch to say we Canadians got it all right. And I'd like you to show us up, do better. And I'd love to return home and say, let's catch up to New Zealand. And I say that as a proud Canadian. But what we've done well, federally and in Ontario, is to set in legislation a deadline for becoming fully accessible. What we have done well, at least in Ontario, is requiring the government to enact all the accessibility standards necessary to enact to achieve that goal. Federally, we've allowed for the creation of accessibility standards, but we've not required that they be created, and that's a failing federally. We have in both federally and provincially created enforcement powers, but I think we could do better. What we've learned in Ontario is you must have those enforcement powers in the hands of someone in a body that is independent of the government, because the government is the biggest obligated organization, and they are hopelessly conflicted if they must vigorously enforce against themselves. Our federal government did better on that. But unfortunately, rather than creating one enforcement body, they splintered enforcement among 3 enforcement bodies, creating duplication and confusion. I think those are some of the ideas that you could learn and do better than all of us by requiring that when public money is given out for procurement, for infrastructure, for loans, business development loans, that there be accessibility strings attached to them. And show us how to do that right, because sadly, we're not.
Thank you, David.
Not hearing anything.
You're on mute, Angie.
Oh, sorry, team. So we have very short amount of time left, David. So we have Tony, then Jan, then Maureen.
If you each ask really fast, I'll answer collectively really fast.
Good call.
Hi, David. Thanks again. And it's lovely to see you on Zoom. We'd love to have seen you in person or talk to you in person. Hey, look, just a quick question. What would be the first steps that you would advise us to really do to start with?
My advice is include the key components I've just said that you've heard from others in the bill. A goal, full accessibility, a deadline, a duty in law to remove and prevent barriers along reasonable timelines, a duty to create accessibility standards, and an enforcement mechanism.
Great, thank you. Jen.
Very quickly. So I'm just checking your view that we could convert this bill to deliver those things within the next 8 weeks. Is that based on your experience as a lawyer and having worked with governments overseas to be able to do this, and the knowledge of the research we have?
I also spent 33 years as a career government lawyer in the province of Ontario. If you get instructions to do it, you can do it. The bottom line is because the Access Matters campaign has been going on since 2017, like I said, they've got all the advice. They've had time to do all the research. You've got community leaders in the disability rights movement here with whom the discussions could be held extremely quickly because you've already heard from everybody. They know what they need. So it's not a question of how to do it. It's a question of whether to do it.
Thank you. Moving quickly to Maureen.
Thank you. I will be fast. Thank you very much, David, for appearing here on our Select Committee. The legislation we have in front of us, as it's drafted, has some limitations, obviously. One of the challenges that we have as the Select Committee is going back with recommendations for change and having those recommendations discarded because they are seen as being outside the scope of the bill. How would you respond if some of these recommendations that we are being asked to implement or to include in this legislation is given that feedback?
Then I would say to you, I'd say 2 things. The first thing I'd say is that's parliamentary strategy. And you folks come from various political parties. If this bill can't be amended, so introduce another private member's bill or agree to do a government bill, or one better. If you come back with recommendations and all your parties agree on it, you are the parliament. The rules don't rule you, you rule them. And the other thing is, if the idea comes back, which a couple of you floated just as an idea to get feedback of, hey, how about if we just amend the bill to set priorities for this advisory committee? Can I tell you why to reject that? That kind of reform is like getting on the at the dining room of the Titanic and saying the most important thing we need to talk about in the dining room of the Titanic is what do you want for dinner? You're heading for an iceberg. What you have for dinner in the dining room is not the priority issue. The priority issue is fixing the bill.
Thank you, David. We're now just at time, so I would like to just acknowledge you for coming all this way, for your sound work in this area, and thank you very much for a really sound submission. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the privilege of being able to speak to you.
Thank you. So I'm now handing the chair over to Anahila Kanoa Suisuki. I will return shortly. Thank you.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Our next submitter is the Anglican Church in Aotearoa, New Zealand and Polynesia. Are you online? Looks like they're not. Oh, yes. Welcome, Vicki Terrell.
Welcome, thank you. It's good to have the chance to speak to you. My colleague Pt1 is here to interpret if you had difficulty with your questions understanding me. I have prepared a statement which I believe you have in front of you. I want to focus on 2 points today. With that responsibility lie for making society accessible and the cost of accessibility. My colleague Terrell Johnson, who worked with me, doesn't appear to be here at the moment. It is often said to one chatted at society on how it sees it most vulnerable. The Bible is full of references about society doing justice for or with the poor and marginalized. Disabled people are marginalized and isolated because of lack of accessibility in many areas. Making society more accessible is our collective responsibility. This bill puts a responsibility for making society back on disabled people themselves, rather than on the collective responsibility of society. Why acknowledging the import of disabled people is vital in making society more accessible. There needs to be a commitment to legislation that will enable it to be dit speel yet again. We kaya dit able people to dot out experience it on inacceptability, believing more society to be made acceptable without a commitment to acting. Dit discriminating of disabled people who constantly must satisfy why society needs to be acceptable. The responsibility lies for making society acceptable, light with at all collectively, because individuals cannot make society acceptable. It requires a collective effort for building the system to be made acceptable. Everyone benefits from society being acceptable. It has been noted in the background paper, the cost of making society acceptable would be too much more the government and the business sector. I would like to turn that around to try to enact that you consider the cost of not making society acceptable. A lot of disabled people cannot read their potential because of barriers that stop will participating in society. That prevents costs to society in terms of unemployment and total isolation and deprivation. It feels that nothing would vulnerable position of disabled people in our society because there is no commitment to concrete improvement for acceptability. That perpetuate the lack of value placed on disabled people who cannot fully participate in society because of barriers that can, if the political will is there, compete, eliminated. That is my submission.
Thank you, Reverend Vicki Terrell. That's a very good submission. We have 4 minutes left, and Member Pugh, Maureen Pugh, has a question. Maureen.
Thank you very much, Anahila. And thank you, Vicki, for coming to the Select Committee today. I note in the written submission that your recommendation is the bill be withdrawn. And I just wonder if there was something that you saw in the bill, for instance, with the committee, whether if it was given more authority or more power to instruct the minister, and then the minister having a responsibility then to report back on the action from recommendations, whether that may help to improve this bill?
I'm unsure whether that would improve that bill, because there needs to be a commitment for action, and I don't see it anywhere in the bill. And
Okay.
This is Cheryl Thompson speaking. I'm Vicki's colleague. She thought I wasn't on, but I am. I just wanted to support Vicki and the last speaker, who both said that the bill doesn't have any teeth. It's useless for people with a disability, and so it at least has to have commitment to action, as Vicki's saying. So I'll just affirm that with her. Kia ora.
Thank you. Maureen, do you have a further question? Right. Thank you. Notwithstanding what you've said, I think my last question is, you do say you've waited so long. You waited so long, and asking for this to be withdrawn, you were prepared to wait longer?
Yes, because I think that bill will utterly take it back with, not forward. And you can set up a committee without a bill. They're utterly not no reason water bill. It is only to set up a committee that we've been doing that kind of thing for years and years and years.
Thank you, Reverend Vicki Terrell and your colleague, Cheryl Thompson. There are no more questions from the members. I would take it that we have read and heard your submission. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll hand it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Anahila. Now, I have just received a note that the 1215 submitter is not going to come in, but we have at this point, as far as I understand, Cerebral Palsy Society of New Zealand Incorporation. So we have Daniel Clay, Claire Williams and Amy Hogan present. Hello again, Amy. Busy day for you. So we have 15 minutes for your submission. Please take it as read. Right, just so there is one. I can see Amy and Daniel. There we go. So I'm guessing you're clear.
Yes, I am.
Great,
Yes,
great. So we have 15 minutes with you. Please take your submission as being read, and hopefully leave some time for questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Tēnā koutou to you all. I think I'll just start with limited time. I'd like to briefly share some information about CP, the acronym commonly used for cerebral palsy. It's a physical condition, a disability that affects movement and posture, and the severity really occurs differently in all people. And depending how severe the condition is, some of those living with CP could have visual, hearing, or intellectual or speech impediments. CP is caused by the damage to the developing brain, and this is usually caused either during pregnancy or shortly after birth. It is a lifelong condition and generally worsens over time. Currently, the society, we have about 1,400 members, but we do have, on average, an estimated 10,000 living with a condition throughout New Zealand. And the society, our aim is to support all those living with cerebral palsy to actually live their lives to the fullest potential. We do this with the services and programs that we offer. We offer financial supports and information and advice and advocacy. One of the main issues that are raised constantly by those living with CP and their whānau is access barriers. It significantly affects their daily lives. With the 10,000 currently estimated to live with the condition in New Zealand, this is set to increase significantly as stats reveal that there's one baby born with a condition every 3 days. And further evidence by Stats New Zealand was that Māori and Pasifika have higher than average disability rates. So from a society's perspective, we support both the Access Matters submission, and we submit our own presentation based on those living with CP throughout New Zealand. Thank you. I'll pass on to Amy Hogan.
Hello again. My purpose here is to talk about the key aspects of what access means to us. And the fundamental viewpoint for my entire presentation is that access is a necessity, not a nice to have. Our people with CP, our members struggle with the built environment to get into places they need to get into. They struggle with the information access, the ability to process things that are in the condition once they're in the building. They struggle to get out in the community and to have a daily life. For us, accessibility is a pathway to citizenship. I could tell you 1,000,001 heartbreaking stories, like people having to change their children on tables because there isn't an accessible toilet, there isn't accessible playgrounds, there isn't accessible workplaces. Like every aspect of our individuals' lives are affected by access barriers on a 24/7 basis. And yes, you can figure out one aspect of access, you can figure out a ramp that isn't quite right, but it's the cumulative effects of access barrier after access barrier after access barrier. It's truly exhausting. And in New Zealand, we mythologize the idea of the number 8 wire, the idea that we can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, do everything for ourselves. Everything is okay with a bit of number 8 wire and a can-do attitude. Yes, that can happen, but we need somebody to provide the foundation so that we don't encounter access barriers when we're getting to a place. We don't encounter access barriers when we're in a place. We don't encounter access barriers when we're trying to convey our opinion and our support. And we don't encounter access barriers throughout the lifespan for both the individuals and the whānau. Like, it's my birthday, and I have been doing this for 37 and a couple of hours years, and it can become cumulatively exhausting for both the individual and the family. We fundamentally support this bill as a first step, but we can't do the heavy lifting forever. Our backs will literally give out, because a lot of our families' backs do give out when they're lifting their children, but also our collective will give out. And that's a shame for the entirety of society who, as I've said before, if they haven't come to a disability now, they'll come to a disability in the future. I'm going to pass on to my colleague Dan to talk about the particulars of the bill.
Kia ora, Amy. Kia ora koutou, ko Daniel Clay toku ingoa. I'm a board member of the Cerebral Palsy Society. I'm also a parent of a child with cerebral palsy, a wheelchair user. So I have 10 years of lived experience. And in fact, you heard from my wife this morning, Amy Clay, the first submitter. So our position is, as Amy noted, we do support the intent of the bill, but in our view, it doesn't go far or fast enough. What we need is changes to the relevant legislation and regulations now. Access barriers, they significantly affect daily lives, and the issue is urgent. Now, the committee is a useful method to gather the information and make recommendations, but we say it needs a stronger and faster mandate. One of the things we've noticed is there's no date for the initial recommendation to the minister. That should be done in the first year. We suggest that immediate information gathering is undertaken for the initial recommendations. There's already a wealth of information on access barriers, and that should be relied on, as well as public input for that immediate set of recommendations. The recommendations which relate to specified entities, we say should be provided directly to those entities so they can be aware of them and respond in more timely a manner, rather than the matter going to the minister, then going to the House, and then perhaps going out to the specified entities. This may come outside the bill or through the bill, but access standards need to be developed immediately. As I say, there's existing research and public input, including in Access Matters have suggested this, a barrier notification system where people who face access barriers can have some way of informing the committee. Ultimately, we do need law changes to remove the access barriers, both through the bill and more direct changes to legislation, being the Building Act, the Local Government Act for councils, and the Natural and Built Environment Act. So this committee's been hearing real life examples of those needing better access. Accessibility is one of the most important issues for those with cerebral palsy. It is, and I speak from experience, a daily problem. It prevents people from being part of the community, being independent, and living their lives as to their potential. So we appreciate the bill as a start. Whether it's a good start is debatable, but we implore you and the lawmakers to strengthen the bill, to expedite the process and change the laws, the relevant laws, as a matter of urgency. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, Daniel. Sound submission, thank you so much. So first and foremost, Amy, did you say it was your birthday today?
It's actually tomorrow, but
tomorrow, right. Well, happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Imagine spending your time. I'm pleased you're not in select committee on your birthday. We'll move now to Maureen Pugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the written submission, you've suggested that the committee be granted the power to develop both binding and non-binding standards. I'm not sure if you can answer this, but some of those standards will expand across, as Daniel's just explained, across different ministries. So how do you anticipate the standards being enforceable across multiple ministries of the government?
Well, ultimately that will require law changes, and that's what we're asking the committee to recommend. The bill is limited in terms of what it can do in terms of its the infrastructure around the recommendation process. What we, and I'm sure others are saying, is we need law changes now in whatever form they should be made. We're not the experts at that. I'm sure the officials can advise, but we're asking for law changes now and through the bill process, the committee process, to improve accessibility.
Okay.
Whether they be through regulations under the relevant legislation or direct law changes.
Okay, understand now. Thank you.
And we're not asking you guys to do all this tomorrow. Like, as I said in my last submission, we're kind of experts at being disappointed. But what we want is for there to be a commitment to a timeline of something happening. Like, not just, it would be great if we could produce a utopia tomorrow, but we're realistic about that. But a pathway to somewhere. At the moment, it's a pathway to nowhere.
Understand. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks. I think we don't have any further questions for you. But I do want to just acknowledge your submission. You will know that we are now having a series of theme-based submissions. So a lot of the questions we've previously asked, we've probably even asked you all about those as well. So we are at time now, but I want to thank you for your submission. And I also want to thank you for the comments about the PCBU. I think that was a really useful suggestion as well. And I do not want you to be experts at being disappointed. So just be assured we have heard your submission. Amy, happy birthday for tomorrow.
Thank you.
And I hope you all go well. Thank you so much for coming before us and submitting. That now brings us to the end of this public session until 1 p.m. We will, if we can join back in about 5 to, so we all know we're in the room. There will be a new agenda out, if you can check that agenda, and also there will be some instructions as to supporting the accessibility of a submitter later in the day. So if you could look to your emails about that as well. With that, thank you everyone. We will see you back here at 12:55. Thank you. To start at 1 p.m.